How could you forget something so basic? Clara? Emily would never be so careless. Beatrice's sharp tone sliced through the warm air of the kitchen like a knife. Her words wrapping around me tighter than the steam rising from the pot of soup. My fingers clenched around the wooden spoon until my knuckles turned white. I kept stirring, pretending the bitterness of her voice wasn't sinking into my skin. But it was. God, it was. My name is Clara Mason. I'm 32, a nurse, and for the past 3 weeks, I've been living in Beatrice's house, taking care of her after her surgery, juggling my hospital shifts, sacrificing sleep, missing important days with Ben, my husband, just to be here. To help, not because anyone forced me to, but because deep down, I wanted to bridge the cold, distant gap that had always existed between Beatrice and me. But no matter how much I gave, no matter how much I tried, it always seemed invisible next to Emily, Beatrice's golden child. Careless, that word stuck to my ribs like wet cement. I swallowed hard, tasting humiliation more than the soup's seasoning. Beatrice sat at the table behind me, her silver hair perfectly set, her lips pursed in that permanent look of disapproval she wore like perfume. Emily, as usual, was nowhere to be found, probably posing with some latte for her Instagram story while I stood here ladling soup like some invisible servant. I gritted my teeth, forcing the anger down. I had cancelled a girls' trip, switched my shifts, even missed my own anniversary dinner just to be here. And for what? To be told I wasn't good enough because I hadn't added enough salt? The front door creaked open. Heels clacked against the hardwood. Speak of the devil. Emily breezed into the kitchen, flowers in one hand, her phone in the other, smiling like she'd just stepped out of a magazine shoot. She barely glanced at me before swooping down on Beatrice with a hug and a kiss on the cheek. Smells amazing in here, she chirped, flashing her perfect white teeth. Beatrice's face lit up instantly, all earlier frustration melting away like snow under the sun. Emily, sweetheart, you're just in time, she gushed. I was telling Clara how important it is to pay attention to the little things. Not that she would understand. I bit down hard on the inside of my cheek. Emily turned to me, her smile syrupy sweet, her voice dripping with fake warmth. Don't worry, Clara, taking care of Mom isn't easy. I've been learning that myself. I wanted to scream. Instead, I stirred the soup, feeling every muscle in my arms coil tighter. Emily plopped her flowers on the counter and pulled out her phone without missing a beat. Right on schedule, she posed beside Beatrice, leaning in with that dazzling smile, snapping selfies like her life depended on it. Just capturing these precious moments, she said, laughing lightly. Beatrice beamed. It's so wonderful having both my girls here. My stomach twisted. Both her girls. Like Emily was actually putting in any real work. I was the one waking up at 2 a.m. to adjust Beatrice's pillows. I was the one making sure her medications were taken at the right time. Emily floated in once a week, snapped a few photos, and floated right back out like a damn ghost. And yet, to Beatrice, she was the devoted daughter, the golden child. Mom, Emily said casually, scrolling through her phone, probably applying a filter to make herself look even more angelic. I was thinking, I might bring you some of that herbal tea you like next week. From that cute shop downtown. Beatrice clasped her hands together, her eyes shining. Oh, Emily, you're always so thoughtful. You always know exactly what I need. The air left my lungs like I'd been punched. Something inside me snapped. Thoughtful? I blurted out, my voice sharper than I intended. Both of them turned to me, surprised. I swallowed the lump burning my throat. She drops by once a week, takes a couple of pictures, and vanishes. I'm the one here every day, every hour. Emily didn't even blink. Her smile stayed plastered on. But there was a flicker, a flash of something cold and calculating behind her eyes. Clara, she said sweetly, I didn't realize this was a competition. We're all doing our part in our own way. I bit back a bitter laugh. My part involved bedpans and late-night blood pressure checks. Her part involved hashtags and heart emojis. Some more than others, I muttered under my breath. Turning back to the stove. The tension in the room crackled like a live wire. For a moment, I hated myself, not because I wasn't right, but because I'd let her bait me. Because I'd let myself sink to her level. To make it sound like I was keeping score. Maybe I was. Maybe you can only get kicked so many times before you start kicking back. That night, after Emily's weekly photo shoot and casual promises floated out the door with her, I sat in the guest room with the lights off. My phone pressed against my ear. Ben answered on the second ring. His voice a warm balm I hadn't realized how much I needed. "Hey, baby, everything okay?" "No," I whispered, and just like that, the tears started. "I'm so tired, Ben," I choked out. "I'm doing everything for her. Everything, and she doesn't even see me. She barely notices." Emily walks in for 10 minutes. Brings a bouquet, takes a selfie, and suddenly she's the hero. Ben sighed, that heavy, resigned sound that traveled all the way through the phone into my chest. "Clara, you know how my mom is. She's always been like this. You can't take it personally." "I know she's like this," I snapped, harsher than I meant to. "But that doesn't make it easier. Ben, it doesn't make it hurt any less." There was a pause, a beat of silence heavy with everything we both knew but hadn't said. "Maybe," Ben said finally, "it's time to take a break." I closed my eyes, the idea so tempting it almost broke me. "I miss you," he said softly. "Come home for a while. Let Emily step up for once." I wiped my eyes roughly with the sleeve of my sweater. "I don't know if I can just walk away," I said, voice trembling. "What if she needs me?" Ben's answer was firm, steady. "She'll manage. You've already done more than anyone could ask. It's okay, Clara, it's okay to choose yourself." For the first time in weeks, a tiny crack appeared in the wall of guilt and obligation I'd built around myself. And I realized, maybe Ben was right. Maybe it was okay to put myself first. Maybe it was time to stop fighting for someone who didn't even notice I was bleeding. I barely slept that night. The conversation with Ben kept replaying in my head, looping between temptation and guilt like some broken record I couldn't turn off. I kept seeing Beatrice's face, hearing her voice, sharpened with criticism, dripping with disappointment. It made me feel like a child again, desperate for approval that would never come. At sunrise, the decision still wasn't clear. I sat at the tiny kitchen table with a cup of cold coffee clutched in my hands, staring at the wall like it might hand me an answer. Maybe I could leave, maybe I deserved to leave. But just as the thought started taking root, the sound of a cane tapping against the floor jolted me back to reality. Beatrice shuffled into the kitchen, her face set in that familiar scowl, her eyes flicking over me with cool indifference. "There you are," she said sharply. "I thought maybe you overslept. It's not good for the schedule to start late. You know." I bit my tongue so hard I tasted blood. God forbid I sit for 5 minutes without being reprimanded. I stood up, robotically moving to pour her a cup of tea, trying to shake the heaviness dragging on my limbs. "You know," Beatrice continued, settling into her chair with a heavy sigh. "Emily never needed reminders like this. She just knew what needed to be done. It's instinct for some people." And there it was, the knife, twisted just a little deeper. I set the cup in front of her with a shaky hand. "I'm doing the best I can, Beatrice," I said quietly, forcing the words out even though I already knew they wouldn't matter. She sniffed, unimpressed. "Your best has never been quite enough, has it?" Something in me cracked. It wasn't a dramatic explosion. No screaming, no slamming things around. It was quieter than that. Colder, like a door inside me finally swinging shut. I took a slow, measured breath. I think I'm going to go home for a few days, I said, my voice calm and level. Beatrice's head snapped up, her eyes narrowing. What are you talking about? I need a break, I said, choosing each word carefully, willing my voice not to shake. Ben's right. I've done a lot here. More than enough. Her mouth opened and closed like she couldn't quite believe what she was hearing. You're abandoning me? I'm not abandoning you, I said, trying to keep the edge out of my voice. Emily's around. She can help. Beatrice let out a harsh, humorless laugh. Emily's busy with work. She has real responsibilities, Clara. Real responsibilities, like posting filtered photos of matcha lattes. Apparently. You'll figure it out, I said, setting my coffee cup down with a soft clink. You always do. Beatrice's face hardened into a mask of rage. If you leave, Clara, don't bother coming back. The words hit like a slap. But instead of crumpling like I once would have, I felt something entirely different bloom inside me. Freedom. Okay, I said simply. Her eyes widened in disbelief. She expected me to beg, to apologize, to grovel for forgiveness that would never come. But I just turned, walked to the guest room, and started packing. Each folded shirt, each zipped pouch, felt like shedding a layer of invisible chains I hadn't even realized I'd been dragging behind me. By the time I zipped the suitcase closed, I felt lighter than I had in months. I was halfway to the front door when Beatrice's voice floated after me. Brittle and sharp. You'll regret this, she spat. I paused, hand on the doorknob, and looked back at her one last time. No, I said softly, I regret staying this long. And with that, I walked out. The 2-hour drive home felt like stepping out of a hurricane and into a calm, still pond. I cried most of the way. Not from sadness, but from the sheer relief of it all. When I finally pulled into our apartment complex, Ben was waiting outside, pacing anxiously by the curb. The moment he saw me, he broke into a run. I barely had time to open the car door before he was there, wrapping me up in his arms, holding me so tight it felt like maybe I wouldn't fall apart after all. I'm so proud of you, he whispered into my hair. I clung to him, letting the last remnants of Beatrice's house, her voice, her bitterness, bleed out of me and into the warm safety of his embrace. That night, lying in our own bed, listening to the familiar creaks and sighs of our little apartment, I finally felt like I could breathe again. For the first time in weeks. No one was criticizing me. No one was comparing me. No one was treating me like a placeholder for someone they actually wanted. I was just me. Clara. Loved. Wanted. Enough. I woke up the next morning to sunshine streaming through the window. Ben still asleep beside me. His hand curled loosely around mine. For a moment, I just stared at him, memorizing every peaceful line of his face. I almost didn't hear my phone buzzing on the nightstand. I reached for it reluctantly, my heart skipping when I saw Beatrice's name flash across the screen. For a second, I considered letting it ring, just ignoring it, pretending she didn't exist for a little while longer. But curiosity, or maybe the tiniest flicker of guilt, won out. I swiped to answer, pressing the phone to my ear. Hello? There was a long pause on the other end, filled with a static tension that made my chest tighten. Then Beatrice's voice came through, brittle and strained. Clara, she said, her tone almost unrecognizable. I need your help. And just like that, the knot I'd spent all night entangling tightened right back up again. I sat there frozen, the phone pressed against my ear, trying to process what I'd just heard. I need your help, Beatrice repeated, her voice cracking slightly, as if admitting those 4 words physically pained her. I swallowed hard. What happened? There was another long pause, and for a moment I thought she might hang up. But then she spoke, each word brittle and thin. Emily, she said, almost spitting the name out. I haven't heard from her in days. She said she'd come by, she promised. But she's not answering my calls. And I can't get down the stairs anymore. I can't even reach the kitchen without help. For a split second, a tiny, cruel part of me wanted to say good. Wanted her to feel what it was like to be abandoned, overlooked, forgotten. But hearing the fear in her voice, the rawness, it hit something deeper. I closed my eyes, letting out a slow breath. "I'm sorry, Beatrice," I said carefully, choosing every word like diffusing a bomb. "I really am, but I can't just drop everything and come running again." Her breath hitched on the other end of the line. "Please," she whispered. The silence that followed felt enormous. Heavy. "I'll call someone to check on you," I said finally. "A home nurse. Someone who's trained for this. You'll be okay." There was a beat of stunned silence before her voice hardened. "So you're really abandoning me?" I winced but kept my tone steady. "I'm doing what's best for both of us, Beatrice." And then, before she could say anything else, I ended the call. My hand trembled as I set the phone down. Ben stirred beside me, blinking groggily. "Everything okay?" I shook my head, crawling back under the covers, curling against him like I could somehow block the world out. "Not really," I whispered, "but I think it's finally out of my hands." Over the next couple of days, I checked in with the home care service I'd arranged for her. They confirmed someone had been assigned, a sweet woman named Carla, who would stop by every morning and evening. I should have felt relief, should have been able to finally let go. But the guilt clung to me like a second skin. Until 3 days later, when the twist I never saw coming hit like a wrecking ball. I was walking back from the grocery store when my phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't Beatrice. It was Emily. I stared at the screen in disbelief before finally answering. "Hello? Clara." Emily's voice was sharp, frantic. "You need to get to Mom's house. Now." My stomach twisted instantly. "Why? What's going on?" "She fell," Emily said, breathless. "The home nurse called me. Said she found her at the bottom of the stairs this morning. They're taking her to County General." I stopped dead in the middle of the sidewalk, the bags nearly slipping from my hands. "Is she?" I couldn't even finish the sentence. "I don't know," Emily snapped. "But this is your fault." My mouth dropped open. "My fault? Are you serious?" "You abandoned her," she hissed. "You left her when she needed you the most." I closed my eyes, feeling a hot rush of anger rise in my chest. "I left," I said slowly, "because you told everyone you'd take care of her. You made all those promises. Remember?" There was a beat of silence. "Just get to the hospital," Emily said finally, her voice tight, "before it's too late." And then she hung up. The drive to County General felt endless, my heart pounding so hard it made my vision blur. By the time I rushed into the Emily was already there, pacing the hallway like a caged animal. The moment she saw me, she marched over. "This is on you," she snapped. I ignored her, pushing past toward the nurse's station. "Beatrice Mason," I said breathlessly. "She was just brought in." The nurse nodded, typing quickly into her computer. "She's stable," she said after a moment. "Minor fractures. She's lucky it wasn't worse." Relief slammed into me so hard I had to grip the edge of the counter to stay upright. "Can I see her?" The nurse hesitated, glancing between me and Emily. "She asked for Clara," the nurse said finally, motioning for me to follow her. Emily let out a noise halfway between a scoff and a sob. But she didn't stop me. When I walked into the room, Beatrice looked smaller than I'd ever seen her. Fragile, human. Her arm was in a sling. There was a nasty bruise blossoming along her temple. But her eyes, those sharp, steel blue eyes, brightened the moment she saw me. "Clara," she whispered. I moved closer, unsure of what to say, unsure of what she wanted. She reached out with her good hand, and to my own shock, I took it. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice hoarse. "I'm so sorry." Tears pricked at my eyes, unexpected and sharp. "You don't have to say that," I said, my voice trembling. "I do," she insisted, squeezing my fingers weakly. I treated you terribly. I pushed you away when you were the only one who ever stayed. I shook my head, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. I was wrong about Emily. She continued, her voice cracking. Wrong about a lot of things. I sat down in the chair beside her, feeling something inside me start to unravel, a knot I didn't even know had been there for years. It's not too late, I said quietly. We can start over. For the first time since I met her, Beatrice smiled. A real smile. A tired, broken, but genuine smile. I'd like that, she whispered. And right there, in that sterile hospital room filled with the steady beep of machines and the faint smell of antiseptic, something shifted between us. Something real. Something that might just be worth saving. The days after Beatrice's fall passed in a kind of fragile truce. I visited her every afternoon after my shifts, bringing small things, her favorite pastries, new books, a bright scarf to drape over her hospital blanket. She seemed to soften a little more with each visit, her smiles growing less strained, her thank yous sounding less obligatory. But not everyone was thrilled about the new peace between us. Emily showed up at the hospital exactly once. She breezed into the room with a huge bouquet of roses and an even bigger attitude, snapping selfies from different angles like she was at a photo shoot instead of visiting her injured mother. Beatrice tried to smile for the camera, but I saw the way her hands fidgeted with the blanket, the way her eyes kept darting toward me like she needed an anchor. After about 10 minutes, Emily declared she was too busy to stay and flounced out, leaving behind a cloud of expensive perfume and tension so thick I could barely breathe. I didn't say anything, neither did Beatrice, but something had shifted. Later that night, as I was getting ready to leave, Beatrice cleared her throat awkwardly. Clara, would you consider staying a little longer? Not just for visits. Maybe when I'm discharged. Just for a little while. Until I'm stronger. I stared at her, stunned. This was the woman who once told me I was barely qualified to boil water. Asking me, for help. I don't know. I stammered. I mean, if you really want me to. Her smile was shaky but real. I do. Something warm flickered in my chest. Not triumph, not revenge, just something closer to healing. I'll think about it, I said gently. And for the first time in months, she nodded, accepting that answer without a single cutting remark. The next twist came 2 days later, when I returned home to grab more clothes and found Emily waiting for me in the parking lot of my building. She was leaning against her sleek black SUV, sunglasses perched high on her head, tapping her manicured nails against the door. When she saw me, she straightened, her smile tight and brittle. Clara, she called out, her voice syrupy sweet in the way that immediately set my teeth on edge. What do you want, Emily? I asked warily, clutching my bag a little tighter. She pushed off the car and sauntered over like she had all the time in the world. I just thought we should talk, she said, tossing her hair over her shoulder. You know, about Mom. I narrowed my eyes. What about her? Emily's smile faltered for a split second, then snapped back into place. I just think it's best for everyone if you know, don't get too comfortable. I blinked. Excuse me? She shrugged, pretending to study her nails. You're doing your little Florence Nightingale thing now. And that's cute. Really. But let's be real, once Mom's back on her feet, she's not going to need you hanging around. I stared at her, disbelief washing over me like a cold wave. You're unbelievable, I said, my voice low. You're not even pretending to care anymore. Her smile sharpened. Care? About what? About a woman who never saw me as good enough either? Please. That hit harder than I wanted to admit. You could at least try, I said, my voice shaking with anger. She's your mother. Emily laughed. A hollow, humorless sound. She's your problem now, Clara. Congratulations. And with that, she slid back into her car and sped off. leaving nothing but the acrid smell of burning rubber behind her. Back at the hospital, Beatrice seemed different, quieter, sadder. She picked at her dinner, barely touching her food, her mind clearly 1,000 miles away. Finally, after what felt like an eternity of silence, she spoke. "Was she awful to you?" she asked softly. Not meeting my eyes, I set down the magazine I'd been pretending to read. "Yeah," I said honestly, "she was." Beatrice nodded slowly, as if she'd been expecting it. "I think," she said after a long moment, "I spent so many years believing Emily was who I wanted her to be, that I never really saw who she was." I didn't know what to say, so I just sat there, letting her words hang in the air. "It's funny," she murmured, almost to herself. "When you're lying flat on your back with nothing but time to think, you start to realize how much you got wrong." I swallowed hard, feeling a lump form in my throat. "You didn't get everything wrong," I said quietly. She gave a short, brittle laugh. "Maybe not, but I got enough wrong to cost me things I can never get back." She looked at me then, really looked at me, and I saw something in her eyes that almost broke me. Regret. Real, bone-deep regret. "I don't want to lose you too, Clara," she said, her voice trembling. And right there, without warning, Beatrice Mason, steel-spined, razor-tongued Beatrice, reached out and squeezed my hand. I squeezed back, not out of obligation, not out of pity, but because, somehow, despite everything, some tiny part of me still believed people could change. Even her, especially her. That night, as I lay in the uncomfortable hospital chair beside her bed, I realized something. Forgiveness isn't always loud. It doesn't always come with grand gestures or flowery apologies. Sometimes, it's just two people sitting quietly in the same room, deciding to start again, and sometimes, that's enough. But little did I know, another storm was already brewing. And this time, it wasn't coming from Emily. It was coming from Beatrice herself. A revelation she hadn't yet told me. A secret that would change everything. The next morning started like any other. I got to the hospital just after sunrise, still rubbing sleep from my eyes, a coffee in one hand and a bag of fresh croissants in the other. Beatrice was awake, sitting up in bed with a stack of papers in her lap, her face drawn tight with nerves. Something was different. "Good morning," I said softly, setting the coffee down on her table. She didn't respond right away, just kept staring at the papers like they might burst into flames if she blinked. Finally, she looked up, her eyes clouded with something I couldn't quite place. "Clara," she said, her voice trembling slightly, "I need to tell you something." My stomach tightened instinctively. "Okay," I said carefully, pulling up a chair beside her bed. She took a deep breath, her fingers trembling as she shuffled through the papers. "I've been working on some things," she said slowly, "and I had my lawyer draft them up before I came in for surgery." I leaned in, heart pounding. "What kind of things?" Beatrice's mouth twisted in something that wasn't quite a smile. "My will," she said simply. I blinked, taken aback. Your will?" She nodded. "I updated it before the surgery, just in case." My heart thudded painfully in my chest. "I don't understand," I said. "Why are you telling me this now?" She hesitated, then held out a sheaf of papers. I took them, my hands unsteady. There, in black and white, were the words that made my breath catch in my throat. She had left everything to me. Not just a few sentimental items. Not just a token gift to ease her conscience. Everything. The house, the savings, the small beach cottage she rarely talked about but secretly loved. All of it. My hands shook as I looked up at her, disbelief crashing over me like a tidal wave. "Beatrice," I whispered. "Why?" Tears welled in her eyes. The first I had ever seen from her. "Because you were there," she said simply, "when no one else was. Because you loved me even when I didn't deserve it." I opened my mouth, but no words came out. And because, she continued, her voice thick with emotion, I want you to have something good after everything I took from you. The weight of her words hit me harder than any insult ever had. This wasn't a guilt offering. This wasn't an apology wrapped in a bribe. This was real, honest, raw. I sat there, stunned into silence, the papers clutched in my lap as the world tilted slightly on its axis. But of course, nothing stays simple for long. The twist came 2 days later, when Emily stormed into the hospital room like a hurricane, her face twisted with rage. You have got to be kidding me, she shrieked, holding a crumpled letter in her fist, the same letter Beatrice's lawyer had sent out officially notifying the family. Beatrice flinched, her frail hands curling around her blanket. I stood up slowly, positioning myself between them instinctively. Emily, I said warningly, calm down. Calm down, she hissed, rounding on me. You conned her, Clara. You manipulated her when she was weak. Beatrice spoke then, her voice stronger than I'd heard in weeks. No, she said firmly, I made this decision with a clear mind. Clara didn't even know until I told her. Emily ignored her, her eyes burning into me like lasers. You think you're gonna walk away with everything? You think you're gonna just erase me? I swallowed hard, my fists clenching at my sides. This isn't about erasing you, Emily, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. It's about who showed up, who stayed. Emily let out a harsh, bitter laugh. You're unbelievable, she spat. You think being a martyr for a few weeks makes you better than me? No, I said quietly, it just made me present. The words hung in the air, heavy and final. For a moment, Emily just stood there, breathing hard, like she wanted to lunge at me. But then, with a furious cry, she threw the letter down, turned on her heel, and stormed out of the room. Beatrice slumped back against the pillows, looking exhausted but somehow lighter. I'm sorry, she whispered, for all of it. I reached out and took her hand, squeezing gently. We can't change the past, I said softly. But we can decide what happens next. She smiled weakly, tears slipping down her cheeks. Thank you, she whispered, for giving me a second chance. I smiled back, my heart full and aching all at once. The weeks that followed weren't perfect. There were hard days, moments when old habits tried to claw their way back in, times when Beatrice said something sharp without thinking, or when I struggled to shake off the old hurt. But slowly, carefully, we built something real, something better. I moved into the beach cottage after she was discharged, helping her transition back home. We planted a small garden together, something simple and healing. We shared coffee on the porch in the mornings, the ocean breeze carrying away the last remnants of bitterness. And for the first time, we laughed, not the brittle, forced laughter of obligation, real laughter. Easy, free. Beatrice apologized again one evening, as we watched the sunset bleed into the sea. I wasted so much time, she said, her voice thick with regret. I squeezed her hand. We both did, I said, but we have time now. She smiled then, a real, genuine smile, and for the first time, I saw not the cold, critical woman who had made my life hell, but the mother figure I had always quietly wished for. The mother I had finally found. Not because she was perfect, but because she was willing to try. And so was I. Because in the end, family isn't about perfection. It's about showing up. It's about staying. It's about choosing love, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. And for the first time in my life, I knew I had chosen right.